Welcome to Transnational Competition Law course, and dear learner, today I am going to discuss the nature of the remedies of the competition law in Israel, and we will try to fix and try to appraise and see the impact of the scope and ambit of the remedies, competition remedies in Israel in relations to the transnational application of competition law. Therefore, any kind of a discussion on the extraterritorial application and the transnational application of the competition law enforcement and remedies revolves around two major concepts. The first one happens to be the nature of the remedies. We have to see at a very uh, closely scrutinize that what is that nature, and we have to also see that what the nature of the competition remedies offer in matters of the competition law violation happens to be a kind of a scope and ambit in Israel and as well as beyond Israel, that in meaning thereby the extraterritorial application and the transnational application. Let's discuss the nature of remedies in the sense that the Israeli competition authorities have enormous power and exorbitant power in matters of prosecuting the violation of the competition law. As we have seen the mandate of the Israeli Competition Authority, we have also referred to all kinds of law for the sake of reiteration. We will start first with the Economic Competition Law of 1998. We will talk about the law for the fuel industry law and advancement of competition 1994, and then we have already discussed the law for the promotion of competition and reduction of concentration, popularly known as the concentration law, and the lastly is the law for the promotion of competition in the food sector 2014. A slew of these four laws have given a very broad mandate to the Israel's competition authority, and it encompasses a large a number of the powers and functions, and within its functional ambit, it has an authority to prosecute for the criminal offenses for the violation of the competition law. Vis-a-vis, we also have noticed that how the competition tribunal look into the non-criminal violations of the competition law, and how the district court of Jerusalem happens to see the criminal violations of the competition law. With this, we find that there is an appellate authority of the Supreme Court, which hear the cases if the parties are dissatisfied by the verdict of the District Court of Jerusalem and the competition tribunal and the Israel competition authority in matters of competition law. Then in that reference it becomes very important to look at how the remedies on the competitions are working in the Israel, and for that end we have to refer to a very famous case known as Noble Energy Mediterranean Limited case. In that case we what we find that most legal actions taken against the individual and the companies for violating the competition law resulted substantially in cases of enforcement, including consent decree, meaning thereby as that the Israeli Competition Authority, though it has the criminal sanctions and command and control approach of the market and the competition law, it also have a kind of a very liberal construction and interpretation of the competition remedies beyond behavioral remedies, beyond structural remedies, beyond fit it first approach remedy. It can devise any kind of remedies. It all depends on the administrative expediencies and the market's expediencies in promoting and sustaining the competition. Uh, Dear learner, you might recall my previous lecture on the point, and wherein we have already discussed some large number of cases pertaining to Israeli jurisdictions. Here again, for the sake of reiteration, we see that when we notice and we try to decipher the power of the Israel Competition Authority to block exemption and exclusive distribution of the franchisee. We refer to section 14 subclause A subclause B, and we refer to section 15A subclause 2, and we finally establish this fact that out of these two sections and the mandate, the Israel Competition Authority have decided the cases on MBI Pharma for excessive pricing and Gaffneyl versus Central Bottle Company Limited, Tunova versus Nor, RLFI Agriculture Limited versus Man Trucks and Bus AG and others, and Zalicha versus Tinova. In that sense, now we are referring to a case, and that case very aptly and succinctly result into the fact that most of the legal actions which the Israeli Competition Authority or the Competition Tribunal or the District Court of Jerusalem or the Supreme Court of the Israel has handed down, uh, as a cursory glance in a popular jargon, we can say that most of the legal action against the individual and companies in case of violation of the competition law either result in cases of enforcement, or it result in the signing of the consent decree, and to that end Noble Energy Mediterranean Limited case is appointed to that effect. In that perspective, we can say that the competition law and policy, which remains very focused and very potential, but we have to see that as to what are the broad natures and broad propensities and broad tendencies which are to be gathered from the nature of remedies. To that end, we can say the Israeli Competition Authority imposes financial penalties for non-compliance with reporting requirement, and under this authority and functional ambit, the Israeli Competition Authority's enforcement action includes consent decrees, objections, and approvals for merger and restrictive arrangement. Here, what we see that there is a mixed bag of the decision in cases of competition violation. Either it is a market-based kind of an instrument of the financial penalties for the non-compliance, and once we have a market-based system or a non-criminal kind of a prosecution, then the Israeli Competition Authority happens to exercise altogether a different kind of the remedial package and the competition remedy, which include financial penalties for non-compliance, and it tries to emphasize upon the reporting requirement. Thus, we see that the entire enforcement of the financial penalties under the violation of the competition law in the Israeli jurisdiction happens to include mostly the consent decree and the objections, and leading to the approval for the merger. Even in case of the approval of the merger, we have seen that they have partly recognized the behavioral remedies and substantially recognized the structural remedies, and often it also tilt towards what we can say the fit it first approach kind of the remedy, and try to see the restrictive arrangement in the Israeli competition law violation. Now we can turn to other measures what the Israeli Competition Authority have undertaken beyond the financial penalties. It happens to be that it has taken a very radical step against the monopolies, anti-competitive practices, and abusive pricing, and therefore we can say that the Israeli Competition Authority, while while auguring and while advancing the competition remedy, adopts a consultation sought on the privatization decision and the industry's competitiveness. So, if you look at what is privatization decisions and industry competitiveness, and then here we can realize and we can feel that despite it adopt a prosecutorial strategy for the application of competition law and policy, it also have some very uh, important financial packages in the name of some kind of a settlement under the decree, consent decree, objections, approvals of the merger, and restrictive arrangement and the reporting requirement. Alongside, it also gave emphasis on the privatization of the decision, and then it tries to see that the ultimate and the penultimate purpose of the advancement, application, and the enforcement and the advancement of the remedies of the competition law is to restore and maintain the sense of competitiveness in the market and restoration of the market. That objective was never lost sight of, and that is why we see that if we very pinpointedly try to see the nature of the remedies in under the Israeli jurisdictions, and from the standpoint of Israeli competition authority, then besides the financial penalties for non-compliance mostly ends with the reporting requirement, then there are cases where there has been a very strict enforcement actions, and those enforcement actions relates to the signing of the consent decree and signing of the objections, and the approval of the merger, and then that way it tries to have some kind of a restrictive arrangement. Then the measures which are generally taken in the name of the competition remedy by the Israeli competition law and authorities happens to be that it forbids, it condemns the anti-competitive practices and abusive pricing, and it tries to see that how the entire dispute settlement mechanism and violation of the competition law to be sought on the privatization of the decision, and to see the broad goals and the broad objective that in the litigational battle and the entire litigational strategy, the sense of competitiveness at no point of time in the market or the industry should be lost sight of. So that kind of recommendation it makes out is the recommendation for a very fair competition, and it has largely followed the recommendation made for the fair competition and believes in the opening of the market and the regulatory reform. So, in a recommendatory or advisory capacity, we see that the Israeli competition remedies happens to assume a kind of a posture which relates to the fair competition, the market opening, and regulatory reform. In some cases, we have also noticed that there seems to be an exemption granted for the specific cases of the restrictive arrangement, subject to some condition if the Israeli competition authority and the state consider that it happens to be in public interest, and the public interest is not be put in jeopardy, and it will not be detrimental to the public interest and the large public interest. Then there are cases where the exemptions has been granted for the restrictive arrangement to be entered with certain condition. Then the kind of investigation proceedings which are being conducted under the Israeli competition law in case of violation include various sectors, and it tries to see that the anti-competitive behavior, that as to what is the suspected anti-competitive behavior and what is actually the anti-competitive behavior, and in this regard it follows guidelines and policy which has been addressed time to time by the competition authority, and all kinds of the competition concerns which are permeated into the guidelines and the policies issued by the nodal agencies to promote fair market practices have to be taken care of. Thus, we see that the entire nature of the competition remedies in Israel include or happens to be a mixture of the financial penalties in cases of non-compliance with reporting requirement and the anti-competitive practices. On the other hand, what tendencies are discernible is the fact that most of the enforcement actions include consent decrees, objections, approval for the mergers, and restrictive arrangement. Thereby, what we see that the Israel's competition authority also addresses abusive pricing and anti-competitive behavior to ensure a fair market. So, given the strength of the law, that means the Economic Competition Law of 1988, or for that matter, the law relating to fuel industry law of 1994 for the advancement of competition, or the law for the promotion of competition and reduction of concentration, and law for the promotion of competition in the food sector taken together, and the powers and authority which has been conferred under section 14 and 15 of the Economic Competition Act on the Israel Competition Authority and Tribunal and the District Court of Jerusalem vis-a-vis the Supreme Court happens to advance a broad range of the remedies to the satisfaction of the parties in cases of violation of competition law and enforcement and advancement of the remedies. With this, we believe that the nature of the remedies which are permeated into the Israeli competition law serves a kind of a better understanding of the actual functioning of the competition law in extraterritorial application of competition law and in transnational competition law perspective. With this, I thank you, dear learner and viewer, and I wish a happy learning.